Okay, we will go ahead and get started since it is 10 o'clock. I want to ask that if you are joining us by phone or by web, that you please mute your microphone or mute your phone. You can find the mute button for your phone up at the top of the GoToMeeting control panel. And those of us that will be speaking can then hopefully unmute ourselves and do our presentations, and then we won't have so much static and noise going on in the course of the presentation. This webinar is presented by LEAP Texas, Identifying Marketable Skills, National and Institutional Perspectives. As I said, if you're joining us today by phone, if you would enable your audio controls on your phone by entering #20# on your phone, that will help enable the audio controls, and then I can control muting your phone or unmuting your phone also. I am going to serve as the moderator today. I'm Larry King. I am the chair of LEAP Texas. We will have presenters including Rex Peebles, who is the Assistant Commissioner for Academic Quality and Workforce at the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. Eddie Watson, who is the Associate Vice President for Quality Advocacy and LEAP Initiatives with AAC&U. Shonda Gibson, who is the Associate Vice Chancellor for Academic Affairs at the Texas A&M University System, and Cynthia Rutledge Ferguson, who is the Associate Vice President for Academic Affairs, Curriculum, and Faculty Development at McMurray University. Questions, if you would, through the course of the webinar. If you have questions, you can type those in the chat bar, which is on the GoToMeeting control panel, which is probably on the right part of your screen. At the end or toward the end of the webinar, I will read as many of those questions as I can. If you have specific questions for specific people, you might phrase them in such a way that we'll know that they're going to a specific person. Also, if you have questions that we don't get to today, please notice that the email addresses for the presenters are on the PowerPoint slides, and those slides, along with a recording, will be posted on the LEAP Texas website as soon as we can get that done. Our first presenter today is Dr. Rex Peebles with the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. He's going to be talking to us about marketable skills and what the coordinating board is expecting for us. Rex, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, thank you. My pleasure to be here and to talk a little bit about what it is that the coordinating board is looking for from those of you that are trying to figure this out. So if you'll go to the next slide. With the marketable skills goal, and that by 2030, all graduates from Texas public institutions will have completed programs with identified marketable skills. And our target for this is that by 2020, institutions will have created and implemented a process to identify and regularly update their marketable skills for each of those programs, hopefully in collaboration with business and other stakeholders as the institution sees fit. If you'll go to the next slide. So the way that we're going to track this and what we're looking for from you guys right now is going to be embedded in our accountability system. And again, we've repeated the goal there. And so the question for you will then be, has your institution created and implemented such a process for identifying marketable skills? All right? And that'll be a simple yes or no. And if you'll go to the next slide. Then we will also ask a little bit of follow-up to this. So if you answered yes to that first question, have you created and implemented a process or not? Then we want you to describe that process for us a little bit. If you answered no to the question, but you're working on the target, then we would also like you to provide an update on where your institution stands in creating and implementing that process. And this information will be used only for internal purposes. A lot of this is just designed for us to try to figure out where everybody's at and where we may need to provide more guidance or provide more help for folks, or see if we can help people with this process and help them get through it. But it will not be publicly displayed in the 2018 accountability system. So again, the answer to this question will be strictly used for internal purposes in the coming year. If you'll go to the next slide. So then we also want you to enter the total number of programs offered your institution and the number of programs for which you have identified marketable skills at this point. And then we'll calculate a percentage based on that. That'll be calculated internally to ensure consistency. And again, the reason we're asking for this is to get some gauge of where people are at this point. We fully recognize that the target itself doesn't call for completion of this until 2020, but we would like to get some sense of where folks are at so that we can determine where and how and when, hopefully, we can provide some help and guidance in that endeavor if that's needed. And we know that some institutions are well ahead of us on this. But again, it would be real helpful for us to know where people are at. So questions 1 and 3 will be public in 2018. 2 will be internal only. And then in 2019, answers to all 3 of those questions will be made public. And in 2020, we will ask that you formally submit your process to the coordinating board, and we are working on a template for the submission of that process. Hopefully one that won't be terribly cumbersome, but will allow everybody to submit in a consistent way so that we can just take a look at how this is being done and then maybe develop some best practices from that going forward. Okay, and I believe that's the end of my slides. Okay.
Thank you, Ray. Our next presenter is Eddie Watson with AAC&U, and he's going to talk to us about some of the highlights from the AAC&U latest employer research survey that was done. Eddie?
Thanks, Larry, and thanks for inviting me to be a part of this webinar. I'm happy to share what we've learned via our latest employer research, and I'm hopeful as I think about institutions in Texas identifying marketable skills that this research might prove to be of value, at least at thinking about at a national level, what we're seeing as desirable from employers, and maybe that'll help institutions in their local context make some decisions about what to select as marketable skills to focus on. So there's a lot in the latest employer research, and you can see the link, the direct link to the report at the top of this slide, but actually if you just go to aacu.org, along the right-hand side on the main page, you'll see a link to employer research, and it'll take you directly to this. The report is open access, and so you can download the whole thing. We've got a PowerPoint slide deck and other tools that might make it useful for you to share with these findings with various constituents within your context. So from that report, there's really 4 areas that I thought that I would highlight for you today, and it's really employers' perceptions of recent college graduates' preparedness for entry-level jobs or for jobs with advancement opportunities in the near future. Maybe the area that will be of the greatest interest to you as you think about marketable skills is the employer's priorities for college learning. So I'll unpack some of that, as well as talk about a couple of additional things that kind of highlight the way that employers are connecting with higher education these days, such as their views on transcripts and e-portfolios, as well as if they have graduates who arrive and are hired, how do they make up that skills gap? What professional development opportunities do they provide? So that's the quick snapshot of what I'm going to be sharing with you today. Next slide. So an overview of the survey itself. So in the past, AAC&U, I guess, has done a total of 6 employer surveys or focus groups around employers and employability issues. And in the past, the focus had always been on just business executives. Those were those that were interviewed or surveyed. But this year, we did a parallel survey with hiring managers, so those that are non-executives that actually sit down and interview candidates and make hiring decisions. So we were curious to see if there was a disconnect between the two or how closely those aligned. So in most of the slides going forward, you'll see typically 2 data points for each topic or question that I'll share, one being business executives' views compared to hiring managers' views. Next slide, please. So we asked, a range of questions, and including them asking specifically about employers' satisfaction with recent graduates' abilities to apply skills and knowledge they learned in college to complex problems in the workplace. So that was kind of the focus, this notion of complex problems in the workplace. How prepared are students? And business executives and hiring managers nearly equally felt that they were either very satisfied or somewhat satisfied with recent graduates' ability to handle these complex problems. So about 7 and 10 felt that they were fairly prepared. Next slide, please. We ask questions specifically looking at how prepared are college graduates for entry-level positions versus being, I guess, coming out of college ready to be advanced or promoted within the company. And of course, we anticipated that there would be a difference between the two. But as you can see, about 60% of business executives and hiring managers, very close in both of those groups, agreed that most college graduates, 60% of college graduates, have most or all of the skills required to jump into an entry-level position. Thinking about advancement right out of college, hiring managers felt that maybe only 1 in 4 college graduates were sort of already prepared to advance within the company, where there was fewer business executives that felt that maybe 1 in or more business executives, there was a greater percentage of business executives that felt that new graduates were prepared or ready to be promoted within the company. Next slide, please. Thinking very specifically about marketable skills, we ask business executives and hiring managers what they felt were very important skills for recent college graduates. So when they're going through the hiring process, what are they looking for? And 9 out of 10 hiring managers said that the number one thing that they were looking for was the skill of college graduates to be able to effectively communicate orally. Hiring managers, the next 3 things of greatest interest were ethical judgment and decision making, the ability to work effectively in teams, and the ability to apply knowledge that they learned in college into real world settings. You can see the blue graphs here being business executives, and that they rated all of these skills as being a little bit less important, though indeed oral communication was the number one thing that they were looking for, in addition to ethical judgment and teamwork. They also, business executives say that they're looking for critical thinking skills, as well as students coming out of college who are motivated, have initiative, can be proactive to generate their own ideas and solutions. So as a quick snapshot of marketable skills, these are indeed the top things that we were seeing requested by employers, and the report highlights a range of other skills as well that were not as rated as highly as the ones you see on your screen there. Next slide, please. So in addition to specific skills, we ask about experiences that college students might have in college that would make an employer much more likely to hire them. And the number one experience that we found from both business executives and hiring managers that they were looking for in recent college graduates was having an apprenticeship or internship opportunity with a company, business, or organization. That was the number one thing that would increase the probability of being hired. As you can see here, there were other things that were rated at less so, but still pretty highly, such as having experience working in communities with people from different backgrounds and cultures, multiple coursework that involved writing assignments, research done collaboratively with peers was another highly rated skill. Service learning for hiring managers was rated really highly, a little bit less so for business executives. And on this list, you can see study abroad was not as rated as highly as some of the other skills. Next slide, please. We also ask employers about the value of the college transcript, and about half of business executives and hiring managers felt that they find the college transcript useful when evaluating recent graduates' potential to succeed. But when asked if an e-portfolio, in addition to sort of the traditional application packet of a resume and transcript, would that be useful to evaluating recent graduates' potential to succeed, we saw a significant jump in this sort of more robust application package. About 4 out of 5 of both business executives and hiring managers felt that an e-portfolio, in addition to resume and transcript, would be useful in evaluating recent college graduate. Next slide, please. The next 3 slides are really focusing on this notion of professional development. So I guess the notion, if graduates leave college without the marketable skills that employers are looking for, how do they make up the gap? And we did find that about 4 out of 5 employers do have some form of professional development that they offer to make up that skills gap. Only about 1 in 5 said that they do not provide professional development. And so the focus of that professional development is sometimes advanced skills for more responsibility or advancement within the company. At a lesser extent, there's professional development focused on basic skills needed for the job. Next slide, please. We ask about types of professional development that companies provide. So how do you go about making up that marketable skills gap? How do you train your employees, your new hires? And there's a range of different ways that they go about doing that. Some described in-house or internal training, or training that was specific to programs or systems or processes that are fairly unique to that individual company. So in other words, things that you wouldn't have necessarily picked up in college anyways. They also described really training for advancement, so leadership or management training or mentoring toward advancement. There's also professional development opportunities where you would provide support to employees to attend professional conferences, or to even go back to school and take courses or receive certifications related to the job that you're in. Next slide. We ask about whether or not companies had partnerships with higher education to help fill that skills gap. And between half and maybe 6 in 10 of businesses and employers said that they indeed had developed some kind of partnership with colleges and universities. Next slide. And then ask specifically then, if you've got these partnerships with higher ed, what do you do? What do those look like? And so among those. So it sort of maps back to some of the earlier data that I shared. But companies are providing service learning opportunities and internship opportunities and apprenticeship opportunities for students in higher education. They also, sometimes companies have staff or leaders that serve on boards at universities, colleges to advise on curriculum development. Sometimes some of the employees at companies are actually serving as adjunct faculty at colleges and universities to teach courses with content that's specifically needed by that company. There are other ways as well that companies see themselves as partners with higher education. Sometimes they sponsor a scholarship or collaborate on, a variety of different ways on industry-specific degrees or credentials, or sometimes they even host courses at their company location that are maybe being taught by people on their own, at their own site, or being taught at the local college and university. Though it's being taught by faculty at that college or university, it's actually at the company's location. And so with that quick overview, I'm ready to turn it over to our next speaker.
Thank you, Eddie. Great information. I know it will be helpful for institutions as they move forward. Our next presenter is Shonda Gibson, and she's going to be talking about the process that has been used at Texas A&M Commerce on working toward identifying marketable skills. Shonda?
Hello. So can you hear me, Larry?
Can hear you great.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, thanks for having me, and I'll just quickly run through a 5-step process that we used at A&M Commerce in an effort to make this process as simple and streamlined as possible, and to get a foundation so we could at least, just get a start on it. Because at first it seems a little bit unwieldy and complicated, and we were trying to unbundle that as much as possible. So if you can go to the next slide. Okay, so the first step that we took was trying to layer as many things as possible, so that we essentially were not asking the institution to produce and measure multiple things, multiple reports. We were really trying to streamline this, and so we layered the NACE career readiness competencies that are available from the National Association, and then we felt like that list really helped us to bring in what employers were expecting, just as we just heard from Eddie. We also looked at the state core objectives, and we mapped those to see that there was a connection between the foundation and then the potential outcomes at the end of a program like we were looking for NACE. And then we also layered in the A&M system common student learning outcomes, and we strung those together to see where were there commonalities and where there might be differences. And then we teased out some specific language that we felt like was really mission-centric to the university. In addition to this layering, we also took into consideration that many of our discipline-specific accreditors have specific outcomes that are listed. So ABET has for engineering a specific laundry list of skills that should be outcomes of these specific programs. And if you work with any of those types of programs like nursing or engineering, social work, you'll see that those also layered into our list. And so we felt really confident that these 14 marketable skills were at the core of what we felt like were the most important, that we could at least start with these, and then of course we can expand later. But this served as our foundation. And so the next step, next slide, we decided that the best place to start was by asking the students. So who better to identify the skills that resulted as an area of study than a person who's just finished that degree. So we did, in our graduate exit survey, add the 14 marketable skills that we had identified, and we asked the students from their perspective, looking at, back on the degree that they had just earned at A&M Commerce, and we asked them to rank those skills in the order of importance that they felt were as a result of their actual area of study. And then we asked them to also let us know what their level of skill was in each of those areas as a result of their area of study again. And then we also asked them about how confident are you about graduating and going on and discussing this with future employers. And so we'll get into some, I'll show you a slide here in a minute to demonstrate. The most important thing here was that we wanted to see noticeable differences between all of the disciplines. And if we didn't, we knew that we were on the wrong track. But we indeed did find significant differences between all of the academic programs. And so that was very exciting for us. And to date, I think there's close to about 4,700 responses that have been collected, undergrad and grad. And so we feel like there's a really good foundation there from the students to get their perspective on all the disciplines about, you know, again, which of these skills were most important for each area and how confident they felt about their level of skill. So then step 3, and we'll move to the next slide, we went and we took the same approach and we went to the faculty who were either a program director or someone who was actively engaged in designing and managing a academic program. And we asked them in a survey about their intention. So from their perspective, when they built out that program, what were the skills and outcomes that they were trying to accomplish in all that they were doing? And again, they took that same skill list and they rank ordered those for the ones that they felt were most important to all of the students, all the way to least important in that specific area of study. And then we also asked them to estimate their perspective about the student's level of skill in each of those areas as well. And so if we'll move to step 4, then you'll see that that's where we begin to compare those two results. So we looked at, and this is just an example. This is not a specific program. But we heat mapped all of this to look at the intention between what the program design was and what the actual student outcome was, you know, from their perspective. And we looked for mismatches. And we looked at what the student said was most important and then what the faculty said was most important. And we tried to see if there was areas where we needed to look for alignment between the intention and outcome. And this is where we highly encouraged discussions internally with faculty who are teaching in the programs or other people even outside of the academic area, like we heard earlier about internships or specific methods like using electronic portfolioes, so that we could build these things into the academic program internally and then also externally by bringing in kind of a triangulation and balancing of these two things by talking to external stakeholders such as employers or the grad school, that sort of thing, so that we could balance out what the intention was and the actual outcome that the students are reporting. And then we also felt like this helped in communicating what the outcomes could be in an academic program, say for recruiting or marketing materials. Okay, and then in step 5, the next slide, the final area, we got to digging a little bit deeper and we started doing some analysis looking at when you look at the entire university and you start comparing that to some of the academic programs, we were asking some questions about why would there be really significant differences in something, say, like oral communication, because as we heard, that's a really important skill in the employer's report. And so then we were looking for any areas that it showed a really distinctively lower area. And then we also heat mapped and looked for the student's self-assessment in specific areas, looking to see if there were any trends for skills across departments and that kind of thing. So we just did this really deep dive, and we were able to find out a lot of information about our students' outcomes according to their perspectives and what the intentions were by the department. And so I think we've got one more slide, or is this the last one, Larry? I think that was the last one. Yeah. And of course, we'd be happy to answer more questions if anybody has questions about our method and what we did. So anyway, there we go.
Thank you, Shonda.
Thank you.
I would remind everyone also, if you have questions for the presenters, you can type them into the chat box over on the GoToMeeting control panel there. And at the end of the presentation, I will read those questions and the presenters then can respond to those questions. Our next presenter is Cynthia Rutledge Ferguson from McMurray University, and she's going to talk about what McMurray has been doing on marketable skills. Cynthia?
Hi, Larry. Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Cynthia, are you there? Cynthia, did we lose you?
No, are you able to hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. One of the very first questions that Dr. King asked when we were talking about doing this webinar was if I would quickly explain why a small faith-aligned institution like McMurray would want to be so actively involved in the activity of the 60 by 30 text, both within our region and then webinars and activities that are offered. Simply put, it's in the best interest of our students and then our region. We're in Abilene, Texas, and it's important for us as a institution of higher learning to cultivate the gifts and talents of the students in our area and do it to the industry here. We often lose students to the Metroplex because they don't have opportunities to thrive in the business world here. One of the things when preparing for the webinar that I thought you might think of as a question was what would be the difference in perspectives between a private and a public institution. The biggest difference, as I mentioned, we're all invested in the success of the 60 by 30 text, but from a private institution, there's a couple of things that that weigh in that are a little bit different from public institutions, and one of the biggest ones is the fact that we come to it from a little bit different perspectives. We have a luxury that is not afforded. We're not on a timeline. We can spend a little more time organically introducing things, having conversations. If you'll go ahead and advance to the next slide. But ultimately, our goal is the same. We're wanting to have successful graduates and successful students. In that, the other thing that's a shared goal is the fact that we will continue to keep higher education and industry in communication during this entire rollout of this strategic plan. Go ahead and advance to the next slide, please. I mentioned that we come to it from a little bit different perspectives. Oddly enough, we have the same opportunities and the same challenges you likely do. If you notice, I have listed compliance and voluntary as both a positive or a benefit, and then it's also one of our considerations or challenges. We are in a position where, because we're removed from the public mandates, some of our faculty have never had that opportunity to serve at an institution where a state institution where they are under state mandates. This is a perspective that has been a little bit challenging in committee meetings when we have some faculty that have had this experience and some that haven't. One of the things that we're doing in the conversations in our committee meetings is realizing that we do have a choice, and we also have to put the student first. And so choosing not to comply is really not a choice. And so one of the things we are doing here is we're actively prioritizing what makes the most sense for us right now. If you'll go ahead and switch to the next slide. What we're doing right now is we're looking, and the reason why I wanted to present this, especially this slide, is to let you know that if you're just starting out, if you're an institution, if perhaps a private institution that's listened to this webinar and you haven't really started the process, one of the things that we have found very helpful is to look at the different stakeholder groups and see where you can group like-oriented or like-passioned individuals, and then begin to communicate specifically to their interests. Let me explain that just a little bit more, in that our strategy has been to try our best to organically incorporate the conversation of marketable skills into specific areas. What we've done is we've looked at the area on our campus that touches everyone, and that's our general education program. And so we were very fortunate that we had 7 people on our general education committee that were very receptive in 2016 to the idea of, let's look at, it was time to review our gen ed core curriculum at that time in 2016. And so those 7 individuals took it upon themselves to set aside everything that had ever been done before. And that's a positive in that they were open to researching best practices and looking towards the future. From that, we've actually just finalized our renewal or re-envisioning of our gen ed just in the last 3 to 6 months. One of the things that we found is that we knew that whatever we did in our general education program was going to touch every student on campus, and then it would also touch every degree program on campus. And so we knew that that was going to be a very important group of people. I'll speak about them in just a minute. The second group that we were wanting to also begin the marketable skills conversations with, and that was with each discipline and within each degree program. I'll visit about why and how we've organized them in just a minute. The final phase is kind of the wrap-up phase, and this is where we're trying to make sure that regardless of the student, regardless of whether they came in as a freshman or entered as a junior, as a transfer student, we wanted to make sure that we are hoping to make sure that our graduates walk away knowing exactly what they can do, having the confidence to walk into a new setting, whether it's a graduate school setting or whether it's a business setting. We want them to feel confident about not only what they know, but what they can do. And so we'll look at that in the final slide. If you'll go ahead and advance the slide, I'll tell you a little bit about our gen ed program. Very much like what Dr. Gibson mentioned, we approached review of our gen ed and our objectives to try to identify marketable skills that were going to be universal across all programs. Remember, we were looking for our gen ed program to identify for our small university the skills that every degree program would be able to develop and would feel confident including in their degree assessments. What we did is on the left-hand side, you'll notice that those were our prior gen ed objectives. We then overlaid and compared them to the coordinating board's 6 objectives. And then because of our strong alliance with the liberal arts educational model, we have leaned very heavily on AAC&U's resources because our faculty feel extremely confident that that their liberal arts America's Promise really spoke to our mission and our heart. And so we took those, we looked at them, and ultimately we ended up using the coordinating board's objectives on our surveys, both to our faculty and to our students. We used that because in a very realistic, it came down to practicality. We we're one of 3 faith-based institutions here in Abilene. Our population of students has options to go and begin their educational experiences at surrounding community colleges. We knew that it would be important for us to look at skills that these state institutions were also going to be using. And so that was ultimately why we ended up using the coordinating board's objectives in our surveys. If you'll go ahead and move to the next slide, please. During the course of not only the faculty surveys, but also the student surveys, we asked the faculty, could you tell us, please, which of these objectives are embedded and developed not only in the course material, but also in the practice and the assessment portion. 100% of the faculty identified that they developed, practiced, and assessed critical thinking throughout all of the courses that they taught within the gen ed program. That was also universal across each one of the professors that submitted their information. So we asked every instructor that taught within the gen ed program to assess their own skill, their own course based off of those 6 skills. The second skill, that marketable skill that was identified at the 100% level was the skill of communication. Now, not everyone said that they did oral communication. Not everyone said that they did written communication. But between the combination of the 2, communication was a highly valued, highly developed, and highly assessed skill. So the Gen Ed subcommittee identified that critical thinking and communication on oral and written communication would become our new university-wide skills that we would end up implementing through our Gen Ed program. If you'll go ahead and, stay on this one for just a minute. McMurray has a well-developed, long-established program of developing servant leaders. Because that skill did not rise to the threshold where all all degree programs thought that they developed it and practiced it and assessed it, it didn't meet the university-wide criteria for including for skills, for the university-wide skills. Therefore, what we've done, and this is to me, one of the beauties of being at our private institution, is in the past, we had a servant leadership required course. To date, we've now moved to a different model. The critical thinking and communication will be assessed through all degree programs across the entire campus, but we're going to allow students who are interested in earning curricular endorsements. Right now, our wonderful registrar tells me that we can list up to 4 endorsements on any of their transcripts if they're interested. Right now, Dr. Mark Waters has put together a global learning endorsement, and faculty look at their courses. There's a rubric. He's using the AAC&U Global Learning rubric, and by submitting proposals to Dr. Water, degree programs are going to be able to offer courses that have a designation of a global learning designation. And when students take those courses and they earn up to 12 credit hours, with 4 of them going across the different disciplines, with a minimum of C average, which means minimum level of competency, they're going to be able to have the designation of a global learner on their transcripts. We feel like that will be of a little bit more benefit when a hiring manager or a business executive actually does look at a transcript. If you'll go ahead and change to the next slide. I mentioned that Gen Ed was where we started, and one of the next places that we've begun conversations at is our phase 2, which is to begin talking with degree programs about not only the common skills that are going to be assessed within their annual assessment reports, but to also begin thinking about any type of unique or professional skill that employers who look for graduates with that degree would like to see, or would like to have some understanding of whether a student is competent in that. And what we're doing right now with the professional skills is we're just asking departments to begin to think about which of those skills would be easy or could be designated within their curriculum or their syllabi, but we're also asking them to see if they can set up test or level test, competency-based level test, so that we can then begin to use badging and portfolio systems to help report out to hiring managers that our students have at least a basic level of understanding in and competency in those specific professional skills. If you'll go ahead and switch to the last slide. Finally, we're going to try to close the loop here in, I don't know about you, but when we may have the best laid plans, we may think we communicate well with students, sometimes they can walk away and not even realize all that they've done, the transformation that has occurred from a freshman level to a sophomore level to a junior level and to a senior level. And so this last phase is going to be more of a campus-wide approach. Once again, we've already begun talking about marketable skills. We've already begun thinking about how we can help students promote the conversation between us and within our students about what they have, what they are capable of, and then having the confidence to try something new. And what I mean by that, try something new, if you look at the right-hand side of the page, we are currently doing the majority of these experiential and project-based activities or curricular initiatives. We are also actively involved in expanding these. What was presented earlier is that hiring managers really value internships, experiential learning activities, and applied learning situations. We already have those, but we're now actively trying to get more students to opt into, if there's a choice in the curriculum, to actually opt into these activities. We're real excited about the growth and the collaboration between Cisco University and McMurray University on the development and nurturing of research teams in our STEM program. And finally, we have, as well as I'm sure all of y'all have, the Student Success and Support services here. Each one of those have been recognized to be a high-impact practice that institutions do to support the academic component and the success of students. And so on our left-hand side is our academic support and our student services support systems, and on the right-hand side is the experiential or program-based support and expansion of experiences on the curricular side. That's the last of my presentation.
Thank you, Cynthia. We have some time for some questions now. Again, I would remind you, if you want to ask a question, type it in the chat box. We do have a few questions that have been sent in already. The first one is directed to Shonda. The question is, how is Texas A&M Commerce tackling the resume ready portion of the 30 by 60 marketable skills portion?
Well, let me also make sure that I'm clear that this part of what I presented today is really a foundation so that we could at least get a start on what skills we thought were most important and mission centric to the institution, and find out what the academic programs felt like, was their actual intention, balancing that to this, finding out what the students were saying, working with, external stakeholder groups so that we could find out what could we actually be talking about that's meaningful in relation to an academic program. So that's really the foundation for moving forward, which is a great question that's asked about now, how does an academic program say, these are the top 5 skills that our students report as where they made meaningful gains and they feel very confident in going out into the market and speaking about these things. So now these are actually gems for our marketing department there to use in building out information on the website, video testimonials from students, additional materials like recruiting flyers and information that one might use even in advising whenever a student is thinking about going into a specific area of study. And like another example I can give you about future work, we also use this approach with all internships that are internal on the campus. When those proposals were made, the proposals included what are the marketable skills that would be possible for a student to gain by engaging in this internship. And so before they ever engaged in that action for the semester, they already know what skills are going to result from that activity. And so the plan is that this will inform not only students, but it will inform marketing and a lot of other communication with the student. So, you know, like we've heard a lot today, it's really important for the student to know what the possible gains are for them. So this is very early work, and we hope to see lots of progress made in this area. So keep checking the website, and I'm sure you'll see lots of additions coming soon.
And thank you, Shonda. The next question is for Eddie. Eddie, could you tell us, with regards to the employer survey, what industries were represented?
Yeah, it was a broad swath of industries. In fact, there were over 20 different options for responses within sort of the industry question, and almost all of them were within single digits. So in other words, it's pretty evenly distributed across all business sectors. We also, it was a purposeful sample where we took sort of an equal number of respondents from each of the 4 quadrants within the United States. So in other words, from the Southeast, the Northeast, the Central, and the West, it's pretty much about 25% represented. So it really is a broad national survey that looks at the breadth of the country, including a breadth of industries.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Eddie. Next question is again back to Shonda. For A&M Commerce, do you have a sense about your end product forward-facing to the students?
Yeah, I think that everything I just was saying, it would be those forward-facing pieces, you know, to speak to students, you know, the intentionality around the academic program, the listing, you know, putting it on the website, videos, the recruiting materials, advising, that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. Rex, could you repeat the accountability timelines and submission details?
No, well, so what will need to be submitted, and I think the call for that will be going out pretty soon. And then you'll have, I believe you have until the end of December to submit. I can get some more details on that if someone wants to email me about it. But it will be going out pretty soon to then respond to the questions that we ask.
Okay. And also I'll remind you that the PowerPoint will be available on the Leap Texas website. I'll also send you a copy of the PowerPoint for all that registered, and also the link for the video, the audio recording, well, the video and audio recording of the webinar will be available. And I think, Rex, are those on like your set of slides, or those dates on your set of slides in the timeline?
Yes, they are.
Okay, so those will be at the beginning of the PowerPoint and also the beginning of the recording if you need to catch those there. And yes, Jennifer, there will be a copy of the PowerPoint sent to everybody. We will archive the audio and video on Leap Texas website. So I will put the link in the email that goes to everybody for that also. Any other questions anybody have before we move on? If you have a question, you can just type it in. I want to give you some reminders of things that will be going on with Leap Texas. If you are going to the SACS COC annual conference, there will be an affiliate, Leap Texas affiliate group meeting on Monday, December the 10th. From 5:45 to 7:15, and the room is listed there. Rex is going to be talking to us, so bring all of your questions that you have for Rex, and I'm sure he'll be able to answer every question that you have. Also, remember the 6th Annual Leap Texas Conference is March the 31st through April the 2nd, and again, we're going to be in Houston at the Omni West Side again this year. So please remember those dates. And we want to thank all of our moderators for, all of our presenters today. We want to thank Rex, we want to thank Eddie, we want to thank Shonda, and we want to thank Cynthia for helping us with this webinar today and doing these presentations. We greatly appreciate it. Be looking for some additional Leap Texas webinars coming up. And thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.